One of Korea's signature spring film festivals, the Jeonju International Film Festival, will take place in Jeonju, a city in southwestern Korea, from April 29th to May 8th. Known for its blend of traditional spaces like hanok villages and modern cultural venues, Jeonju offers a unique backdrop for the festival. Today, we'll take a closer look at this year's lineup and the trends to watch with filmmaker and Professor Jae Soh from the Seoul Institute of the Arts. Welcome back, Professor Soh.
Hello, Professor.
Nice to be back.
So, Professor Soh, I heard that you just went to Jeonju last week, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So, what does the city of Jeonju mean to you?
Well, Jeonju to me, my first impression was actually the food. I was actually in the military service at the time, and when I was visiting, I just remember the taste of Hyundaiok's 콩나물국밥, which is, basically bean sprout soup, and then Jeonju bibimbap, which is world famous. But it's not only just the food. I just remember the hospitality of the whole city itself. Like the people that serve you the food are so welcoming, and also if you just go to a regular restaurant in Seoul, you just get a few banchan side dishes. But there, it's a myriad of many different side dishes that come out. And not only is that, it's actually a UNESCO recognized city of gastronomy, which means, the food is really top level. And it's a city traditionally, basically, that was the cultural capital of Joseon dynasty as well, going all the way back to Baekje. So there's a lot of culture, history, good food, and then the film festival. So I would highly recommend visiting Jeonju.
Yes, I've been, and definitely the food stands out the most, in my opinion. But let's talk about this International Film Festival. What are the key characteristics and significance of the Jeonju International Film Festival, and how would you describe its status within Korea and on the international stage?
Well, the Jeonju International Film Festival, JIF as they call it, basically they're famous for being the most important platform for independent and experimental cinema in Korea. So you would, if you want to, talk about other festivals, maybe the Busan Film Festival is more towards the industry and sort of bigger scale, East Asian country films. But Jeonju is really about sort of discovering new talent. Most of the festivals do the same thing, but it's also about finding new voices, sort of kind of a new style of filmmaking, and also artistic risk that people take. So there are a lot of movies that are sort of not non-traditional in the sense that there are a lot of documentaries, experimental movies, things like that. So if you are chosen by this film festival, it means you're doing something very sort of, I guess, innovative and different. And I just remember the first opening I went to in 2000, basically. It was filmmakers now really famous, like Darren Aronofsky had a movie there, and a Japanese filmmaker, Takeshi Miike, was there as well. So it's sort of the start of these directors that were just kind of branching out into doing sort of indie cinema, and eventually they became part of the mainstream. But the festival itself is just has this feel of independence, freedom, and I really enjoy it in the fact that it's situated in the city of Jeonju as well.
Right. Yeah. And Professor Soh, there's always a lot of attention on what's going to be the opening film and the closing film. And I heard that there is a very different tone between those two this time. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So first of all, what I heard was that this year, there's 287 films from 54 countries, and they've chosen basically one an American film to be the opener, which is called Late Fame by director Kent Jones. And this movie is kind of interesting because it's actually based on a really famous novel by Arthur Schnitzler, and it's a novella that was sort of, basically published way after his death, the writer's death. And it's about a story about this person who was having a regular job, and later he's a poet, and then he succeeds sort of in later life, and it's played by William Dafoe. And there's a character named Gloria that, it's representing the younger artistic group in New York, and it's played actually a surprising sort of casting by Greta Lee, a Korean. So originally in the story, it really had Americans in it, But so there's an interesting dichotomy that happens between this kind of artist that is in his later years that succeeded with a bunch of young artists that are now just starting their artistic thing. So Basically, this movie already played in a lot of festivals around the world, and so it's done really well. And so I'm really happy it's the opening night film for Jeonju. And then the closing night film is a movie called The Longest Night, Namtaeryong. And this one's a documentary by director Kim Hyun-ji. And basically, this is outlines the story about, basically what happened in the martial law and what happened in 2004. And what happened in this story is basically
2024.
24. I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. Recent, yeah. So with the Yoon, basically administration. So basically, in this movie, there's a clash between the protesters and basically the police that happens in the this part of Seoul called Namtaeryong. So right out the outskirts. So it's based on a real story. And what I found really fascinating about it was that basically they used a lot of social media in the story. Because Twitter or X comes out prominently in the story as well.
Right, it's pretty striking that I think she's quite a rookie director dealing with this quite recent political issue. So it's very interesting to see how all these tensions are going to be put into a cinematic narrative.
Right. And you mentioned before there are basically like over 200 films that are entering this international film festival. Are there any notable movies in your opinion? And what would you say is probably the most trendy themes that are emerging these days?
Well, I want to introduce the international portion. Jeonju started out basically not as a competitive film festival. A lot of film festivals, there's an award, but now they've changed it. So they have two sections where one is international and one is Korean. And in the international section, if you win this, the prize is like $13,000. It's not a small amount. There were submissions from like 421 films for basically from 70 countries, and they chose 10 films. And some of the films that I want to introduce is a movie called Dream of Another Summer by Irene Bartolome. And this is a story about a kind of a surreal documentary set against a backdrop of Beirut, and as you know, right now it's in kind of a war-torn situation. I remember watching the images are just kind of really haunting of all the war sites, the destruction and things like that. Also, there's a Japanese movie called Michiyuki, and this is a sort of a quiet, memory-driven narrative. It's hauntingly shot in black and white, very Japanese design, and it just feels like a traditional Japanese movie, but it's done in a kind of an experimental style. So that's really interesting. And also, I want to introduce a movie called Chronovisor. And this is a surreal blend of history and science. And it's directed by Jack On. And basically, it's a story that I found it to be just visually stimulating in some ways, and it's based on science, which I also liked. And so many of the films are just sort of, I would say, they take narrative in a different direction. So it's not in the traditional three-act structure with a character doing it, but we have sort of like documentary or experimental works, or some of the movies don't even have dialogue. So what I found about it was basically it's a visual sort of stunning experience to watch them in the cinema.
Interesting. And now the Korean competition lineup, I heard that there is a big focus on family rather than social issues.
Yeah. So this time, last year, I think the movies were a lot more political and louder. This year, it's really family-driven. And then basically, out of 10 of the feature films, 4 of them are documentaries. So, again, we're showing Jeonju's sort of colors in that they celebrate documentaries. And one of the films I really was impressed with was a movie called Living Through the Same Season. It's a love story structured around basically the changing seasons in Korea. It's simple and very relatable. It's directed by Ko Seung-hyun. And also there's a documentary called Water Deer. A director follows her mother's sort of working life. And I found this movie fascinating because it's just an everyday sort of feel about somebody that does their daily chores, but we're watching it and it's really kind of engaging. And then there's another sort of movie called Early Spring. Again, movies about family and seasons. And in this one, it's a young woman returns to her hometown, and basically nothing happens in the story, but you're really fascinated by what's going on. And then one of my sort of favorite ones is a movie called Cruel Optimism. And this is directed by Shin Mo-kya, and the visuals are stunning. And it's a critique of the art world through this kind of weird narrative with it's really designed. All the characters seem like they belong from another universe. And so yeah, the Korean sections are all sort of premieres. So what I found was that there's a overall feel of, as you said, family-oriented, smaller, personal matters, told with great emotional sort of and formal experimentation. So yeah, check it out for sure.
All right, and we also hear that this year at the film festival, there's a special exhibition in respect honoring late actor An Sung-gi. So could you please tell us more about this program?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure actually of working with the actor. It was my first film that I was an assistant director, and it's called the third assistant director, and I was in charge of the actor sort of. So I spent a lot of time with An Sung-gi. This is back in the 90s, and I just found him to be an actor at that time too. He was really famous for being sort of. I kind of consider him the Harrison Ford of Korean cinema. He's that sort of has that stature, and I just found him to be just engaging, not only in front of the camera, but also just behind, just an upstanding guy that really treated everybody, really well. And it's really sad that he passed away at such a young age in his 70s. And, basically he started acting at the age of 5 as a child actor, and he's in one of my favorite movies, which is by Kim Gi-young, called The Housemaid, and he plays a very prominent role as the little child in the movie. And so this section is going to be called Memorable Films Yet Rarely Seen. So 7 films in the 80s and the 2000s. So we have movies like Our Joyful Young Days by Bae Chang-ho, Men Are Troublesome. There's a movie that I would say it's not really seen a lot. It's by a Japanese director, but it's called Sleeping Man. And in this one, it's really sort of a contemplative look at An Sung-gi from a very different perspective. It's not usually his style. And then basically Unbowed, which was a big hit, towards the end of his life. I find it really I can't believe that he's gone so soon. But he was such a staple of Korean cinema. I would say the history of Korean cinema existed with this actor. Yeah.
A legendary actor indeed. And I think it is really meaningful to see that the Jeonju International Film Festival is honoring him by not only having focus on the most famous works of him, but also the lesser known works that really shaped his whole career. So that's all the time we have today, Professor Soh. Thank you very much for your insights, and see you next time.
Thank you,
Professor.
And thank you, Walter, as always. We're going to have you back here next week.
See you next week.